My name is Isolde Marin, 68 years old, retired bookkeeper, widow of 34 years. I live in a small house just off East Bay Street in Charleston, where the air always smells faintly of salt and sugar. I spend most mornings the same way peeling apples for pie, keeping my hands busy so my thoughts behave. That morning, Mrs. Glenn from next door tapped on my screen door, her voice carrying its usual cheer. "Mailman left this with me by mistake," she said, holding a thick envelope edged in gold. It was beautiful ivory paper, embossed lettering, the kind you order when you want people to whisper about elegance. The handwriting stopped me cold. Neat. Confident loops. Corinne's handwriting. My daughter? I smiled for Mrs. Glenn, thanked her, and waited until she left before I turned the envelope over. The addressee wasn't me. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Carter Lyle, friends of Corinne's. Inside, I could see the shimmer of the invitation card through the thin paper. Corinne Marin and Mason Hale invite you to celebrate their union. Not a mistake. Just an omission. I ran my thumb along the seal, then set it on the counter beside the pie dish. When Corinne picked up my call, her tone was bright, efficient the way she sounded with clients. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We kept it small, that's all. Small." I pictured the gold trim and hand calligraphy. Small didn't cost that kind of money. I laughed. Soft enough to sound agreeable, of course. Darling, I wouldn't want to make it about me. After we hung up, I opened my laptop, logged into my credit account, a habit left from years of balancing ledgers. A new charge blinked near the top of the list, Palmetto Blossom Events, $2,400. I leaned back in my chair and watched the cursor blink on the screen. The sound of the ceiling fan filled the kitchen. Corinne hadn't just forgotten to invite me. She'd remembered exactly where I kept my trust. The pie crust waited, unbaked. I covered it with a cloth, washed my hands, and sat very still. Somewhere outside, church bells marked the hour. Steady as breath. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes fast and burns out. What I felt was quieter, like the beginning of a calculation that would take its time. Tomorrow, I would check the rest of the statement. I didn't sleep much that night. The ceiling fan hummed above me, steady as a metronome, while numbers kept arranging themselves in my mind charges, balances, due dates. By morning, I had brewed coffee and opened my laptop again. The credit statement loaded slowly. Line after line of neat betrayals. Palmetto Blossom Events, Magnolia Rentals, Lace and Ivy Catering. Each one posted within the last 2 weeks. Each for amounts large enough to sting, but small enough to hide beneath a polite smile. I pressed my fingers against the desk. Years ago, after Corinne's divorce, she'd cried in my kitchen makeup, streaked, voice breaking. "It's just temporary. Mom, I'll pay you back once things settle." I had opened a secondary card for her, thinking I was offering comfort. I never closed it. Some mistakes age like fruit left in the sun. At the bank, the air smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. The young clerk looked up when I explained the situation. "You'd like to cancel a joint line?" she asked, tilting her head toward the monitor. "It's a secondary card I issued years ago. My daughter has been using it for her event payments." Her fingers clicked softly over the keyboard. "I see several recent charges under her name. One appears to be a venue deposit. A deposit." I repeated, "For a wedding I wasn't invited to." The clerk looked up, startled, unsure if she'd misheard. I smiled to make it easier for her. "It's all right, dear. Let's just close it." She hesitated. "Once I deactivate it, no more automatic payments will process. It may cause inconvenience for her. I'm sure she'll manage." She slid a digital pad toward me. I took the stylus and signed my name slowly, carefully, the way I'd taught Corinne to sign hers when she was learning cursive. When the clerk thanked me for coming in, I told her, "You're very kind," and meant it. Kindness wasn't the problem. The problem was never knowing when to stop offering it. Outside, the air felt heavier, like something had finally shifted its weight. I walked home slowly, thinking about how easy it was to close an account and how hard it was to close a habit. 2 days later, I went to the salon on Broad Street. The same one I'd visited for 20 years. The owner, Marianne, greeted me with her usual warmth. "You picked the busiest day, honey," she said, guiding me to a chair. Half the city's getting ready for that big Marin Hale wedding. I felt the air change around me. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's quite the event." A pair of women under the dryers laughed across the room. One of them, Mrs. Carter Lyle, the name from the misplaced invitation, was talking too loudly to be innocent. "Oh, I heard the venue is divine. Her mother must be so proud." Marianne glanced at me in the mirror, uncertain whether to change the subject. I smiled, small and practiced. "Every mother is proud," I said. Mrs. Lyle kept talking. "And that gown imported lace? Custom work. You just know it's going to be breathtaking." The dryer hummed like static between us. I nodded politely, though my throat felt tight. Marianne began trimming my hair, her movements gentle. "You doing all right?" "Miss Isolde, I'm fine, dear. Just thinking how fast girls grow up." She smiled without looking up. "Faster than we're ready for, sometimes." I watched the mirror instead of the women. In the reflection, the silver in my hair caught the light like thin threads of frost. It made me think of a different reflection, Corinne, at 17, standing in front of the same mirror in my old sewing room, twirling in the prom dress we'd stitched together. She'd wanted satin, pale blue. I'd stayed up all night hemming it by hand. When she tried it on, she laughed, spun, and said, "It looks like something out of a dream." I told her she looked like one. That night, after the salon, I went home and pulled the sewing machine from its corner. Dust rose in the lamplight as I uncovered it. The pedal still worked. The old spool of thread was the same color as that dress. I ran my fingers along the worn metal, remembering her laughter echoing down the hallway. Then I switched off the lamp and left the machine uncovered, waiting. The bank called that morning to confirm the closure. They said I'd need to come in person to sign a final release. I dressed neatly, linen blouse, pearl earrings, armor of civility. Old habits die that way. Folded into presentation. The same young clerk from before greeted me with a nervous smile. "Good morning. Mrs. Marin, I just need a few final signatures to deactivate the secondary line. Once that's done, your daughter won't have access to any linked accounts." She turned the monitor toward me, the screen reflecting the two of us, her composure trained, mine earned. "There's also an automatic payment connected to the venue," she added, tapping a line of text. "It may cause some disruption if we remove authorization today. That's the point," I said quietly. She looked startled, as if I'd said something harsh. I softened my tone. "It's all right, dear. Disruption can be healthy." The printer hummed. Papers slid out warm and thin. She handed me a pen. I read every line in old reflex before signing my name, Isolde M. Mara. The ink dried in seconds. The clerk cleared her throat. "Would you like to notify your daughter directly? Sometimes that helps avoid." "She'll notice," I said. Eventually, I thanked her, gathered the papers, and stepped into the late morning air. Charleston humidity wrapped around me like breath, thick and heavy. Across the street, a newlywed couple posed beneath the live oaks, the bride laughing as the groom tried to fix her veil. Their joy didn't sting. It only reminded me how quiet dignity can feel when it's finally unshared. I walked home along East Bay, the sound of my shoes tapping against the old stones. The city smelled of sea and magnolia and endings. At home, I set the signed documents on my kitchen table, opened my old ledger, and wrote a single line under today's date. Kindness needs accounting. The The page fluttered in the breeze from the open window. I pressed my hand flat over the words until the ink stopped bleeding through. Some debts. I decided. Our best settled without an audience. The call came just after noon. I was folding laundry, the quiet kind of chore that steadies the mind. My phone buzzed across the table. Corinne's name lit the screen. Mom. What did you do? Her voice was already sharp. The venue tried to charge the balance, and your card declined. I took a breath before answering. That's because the account is closed. You can't just do that. They're holding the space. Our ceremony is next week. I thought it was a small wedding, I said. My voice sounded calm, even to me. Don't start, she snapped. You always twist things. I told you it wasn't personal. Then you'll understand why this isn't either. She went silent long enough that I could hear traffic on her end, horns and wind. You're being vindictive, she said finally. Mason's family will think we can't pay. I folded the towel in half. Then again, then pay, I said softly. Her breath caught rage or disbelief. I couldn't tell. You don't know what you've done. This is humiliating. I kept my tone even. Corinne, I gave you that card years ago to help you rebuild, not to fund a life that doesn't include me. You're unbelievable. No, I said. Just done. The line went quiet, then the soft click of disconnection. For a moment, I stood perfectly still. The house was so quiet, I could hear the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Old instinct stirred the need to fix, to make things right, to smooth the ripples before they reached the shore. I opened my laptop and hovered over the bank portal. It would take less than a minute to reopen the account. Less than a minute to go back to the old arrangement. Then I heard his voice, my late husband's voice. Steady and kind as ever. Don't buy your place in someone's life. Isolde, earn it or let it go. I closed the laptop and pushed it away. Outside, a storm was building somewhere near the harbor. The air felt charged. Waiting. I poured myself a cup of tea and let the silence settle where apology used to live. The morning of the wedding began with gulls crying over the harbor and the faint sound of church bells drifting through the window. I poured tea, opened the curtains, and saw the sky already heavy with heat. Charleston summers have a way of turning beauty into pressure. By 8 o'clock, my phone was buzzing. A message from Linda. My neighbor. Is this your Corinne's wedding? People are talking online something's wrong at the venue. I clicked the link she sent. Photos. Short clips. Comments stacking like judgment. Trucks parked outside the Palmetto Blossom Gardens. Vendors standing in clusters. Arms crossed. One post read, no setup yet, payment dispute. Another, bride in tears. Groom arguing with staff. I set the phone down and sipped my tea. A half hour later, another message came, this one from Mason's mother, a woman who had never spoken to me before. I don't know what you've done, but fix it. My son will not be humiliated. I didn't answer. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Then came Corinne's call. Her voice broke through the static, breathless. Mom, please. They're refusing to open the gates. They said your account is inactive. I told you, I said quietly. I closed it. Please. Everyone's watching. The photographers. Mason's parents, just fix it. I'll pay you back. I almost pitied her then, the panic beneath the arrogance. This isn't about money, I said. It's about respect. Mom, stop moralizing, she shouted. I'm begging you. The words hung there, brittle and unfamiliar. Corinne didn't beg, she demanded. I can't, I said finally, and I won't. There was a crash behind her. Voices overlapping, someone shouting, a woman crying, the muffled thud of chaos. Then silence. I turned the phone face down on the table. The porcelain cup was still warm in my hand. From the porch, I could see the river glinting under the noon light, steady and indifferent. Somewhere across town, the ceremony that was supposed to prove perfection had unraveled into noise and dust. I sat back in my chair, listening to the wind move through the palmettos, and let the quiet finish what I'd started. By Monday morning, the headlines had vanished, but the whispers hadn't. Charleston runs on quiet stories, the kind traded over coffee counters and porch rails. Corinne's name traveled fast. Linda stopped me in front of the bakery. "I'm so sorry, Isolde. Folks are saying the wedding was called off. That true?" I nodded. "Seems that way." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "People are saying the venue won't refund the deposit, and the caterers demanding full payment." I thanked her and walked on. The truth was worse. I'd already seen Corinne's messages short, frantic bursts. "They're suing for breach of contract. Mason's parents won't help. They said I embarrassed them." When she finally called, her tone was stripped of charm. "You ruined me," she said flatly. "You could have helped. But you chose to humiliate me." I held the phone a moment before answering. "No, Corinne, I stopped paying for what disrespected me. You don't understand. This isn't just a mistake, it's my reputation. You built that reputation," I said, "and now you'll learn what it costs to keep it." She exhaled, sharp as glass. "You sound pleased with yourself." "I sound tired," I said, and ended the call. That evening, I walked down to the Battery, the sea wind thick with salt, and the faint echo of jazz from some distant bar. Couples strolled past, laughing softly. Across the water, the city lights shimmered like something fragile pretending to be whole. I leaned against the rail, hands resting on the cold iron. The night felt wider than it had in years. I thought of my husband, how he used to say that peace isn't something you're given. It's something you stop surrendering. Behind me, the city murmured, restless and alive. Ahead, the tide whispered against the stone. I stayed until the air turned cool enough to sting, then headed home free. Lonelier than before, but lighter all the same. 3 months later, the air in Charleston had softened. Tourists filled the cobblestone streets again, and I had begun to measure my days differently, not by worry, but by tasks I chose myself. On Wednesdays, I taught a free budgeting class at the public library. It started small, 2 widows from my church, a quiet woman recently divorced, and one young mother still wearing her wedding ring. They came with notebooks full of panic numbers crossed out. Balances uncertain. I began each class with the same sentence. Money, I told them, is a language of boundaries. It tells you who respects your limits and who doesn't. They nodded, taking notes as if I were teaching something sacred. Maybe I was. I keep receipts for kindness, I said once, half to myself. Not to collect payment, but to remember its cost. After class, Mr. Lyle, the head librarian, stopped me near the desk. He was a tall man with kind eyes and the patient tone of someone used to whispering. "You've got quite a following," he said. "Those women leave smiling. That's not easy around here. I'm not teaching them numbers," I said. "Just how to count differently." He smiled. "You've got a calm way about you, Mrs. Marin, like someone who's learned to keep a storm in a jar." I laughed softly. It used to spill everywhere. He handed me a cup of tea from the staff lounge. "Then I'd say you found your balance." I walked home that evening with the cup still warm in my hands. The city smelled of rain and books and faint hope. Inside my wallet was one debit card, my name alone embossed across it. At the kitchen table, I opened my ledger, not to track expenses, but to note what I'd earned that couldn't be measured. Quiet, steadiness, and something close to grace. When I closed the book, I realized my hands weren't trembling anymore. It was a Thursday evening when the message arrived. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when my phone buzzed against the counter. "Mom." I overreacted. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. The words looked smaller than they should have, as if they'd been sent from a distance too far to bridge. I sat down at the table, the one she used to do her homework on, and began to type. I'm glad you reached out. I hope you're doing all right. Maybe we can meet next week. I stopped, read it again, and deleted every word. A few minutes passed. I tried once more. Corinne, I love you, but we can't pretend nothing happened. I need time. I deleted that, too. It wasn't anger that stopped me. It was clarity. Words wouldn't fix what silence had already taught. I opened my old ledger, the one I'd kept through every season of my life. The pages smelled faintly of ink and lemon oil. I turned to today's date and wrote carefully in the margin, debt forgiven, trust not renewed. The act felt final, not bitter, like closing a chapter instead of burning it. Outside, the marsh turned gold under the setting sun. Egrets moved through the tall grass, unbothered by the tide's slow return. I thought of Corinne as a child, collecting shells along this same shoreline, bringing them to me with both hands open. I placed my phone face down on the table. The screen dimmed, and the room filled with that tender, living quiet that comes only when something painful has settled into peace. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like someone waiting for an apology. I felt like someone who'd already given one to herself. By early spring, Charleston felt lighter again. The air carried salt and wisteria, and Sundays had become mine to fill as I pleased. That morning, I baked bread, 2 loaves, brushed with butter, and set the table for 3, Marianne and Lila, both widowed like me, arrived with laughter that filled the kitchen before the door even shut. We'd met through the library, bonded over tea and the strange relief of no longer needing to be needed. Everything smells heavenly, Marianne said, setting down a jar of preserves. Lila leaned close. You've outdone yourself again. What's the occasion? Nothing formal, I said, arranging the plates. Just a meal with friends. They talked as I sliced the bread about grandchildren, books, the latest gossip about a city councilman who'd married his secretary. Their voices wove through the room like sunlight itself, easy and unforced. When we sat down, Marianne noticed the extra chair. It stood at the end of the table, draped with lace and a single pearl brooch pinned to the cloth. Oh dear, she said softly. Are we missing someone? I smiled. No, that one's for Grace. Neither of them asked more. They didn't need to. We ate slowly, laughing over small things, pausing when the church bells rang in the distance. For the first time in many years, the sound didn't make me lonely. It felt like something kept rather than lost. When the plates were cleared, I poured coffee and raised my cup. To tables we keep small, I said, but never cold. Marianne lifted hers. To good company, Lila added, and to learning when to stay seated. We clinked our cups together, the sound soft but certain. Later, after they'd gone, I left the lace-draped chair as it was. The sunlight had shifted, catching the pearl just right. It glowed faintly, like forgiveness made visible. I didn't move it. Some seats, I decided, were meant to stay open.